This episode with Kathryn Jones could absolutely be my favorite interview ever. She is absolutely phenomenal. She's aligned with my mission, which is to wake you up, to help you to think bigger and to recognize the potential inside of you, and then to help you be in pursuit of that. That's what I'm all about. And that's what she's about. She gives some very simple framework through which you can wake up, and very simple framework through which you can change your story. The fact that you are living in stories right now that are not going to get you to where you want to go. And she teaches us exactly how to change those stories. I can't wait for you to listen to this. I can't wait for you to follow Kathryn. She's phenomenal. And it was such a privilege to interview her. All right, welcome back to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Justin Stoddart. Absolutely thrilled today to have with me here on the show somebody who has become a mentor of mine. Somebody who has done some incredible things in a very short period of time. Her name is Kathryn Jones. Let me fully introduce her here in just a minute. Let me tell you what you're going to get by watching this episode today. Deep inside each and every one of us is more potential than we can even comprehend and recognize. My mission in life is to help wake you up to the potential inside of you and then help you to live in pursuit of that. Kathryns is the same. The reason why they're the same is because I stole from her. I heard that and it like resonated deep inside of me, and it's been my mission ever since. And you're going to love her. Let me tell you a little bit about her story. She's what's called a design hacker. She helps people get rid of ugly websites from their life without having to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to do it. She has an entire movement, an entire following. She's graced the stages that also Russell Brunson and Tony Robbins have spoken on. She's dynamite. You're going to love her, and you're going to want to follow her, which I would highly recommend you do, because your life will be better as a result. Kathryn, thank you so much for coming on the Think Bigger Real Estate Show today.
Oh my gosh, I am honored, honestly. It is amazing. And here's the thing, like you stealing this from me, are you kidding me? It's like, let's get everybody on board. If we could all have that objective, are you kidding me? The world would be a beautiful place. So I'm honored to be sharing a similar life objective with you. What an awesome thing.
It's interesting. This has become, I'm just going to kind of dig into my morning routine here a little bit.
Yeah.
I've realized for me, someone asked me the other day, what is it, Justin, that you do to continue to be a big thinker? This is a question that you're going to get here at the end of the episode. So it's a little bit of a foreshadowing for you.
Yes.
Like, what do you do to continue to be a big thinker, to continue to expand your possibilities? And the tables were turned a little bit. And I said, you know what? I feel like we are consumers and we're constantly consuming. And I said, when I stop to create and to like create things, I move into a different space and I grow at a different level. And so part of what I've had to do every day now is to actually implement into my morning routine is where I'm creating and I'm writing my affirmations. I'm like recreating them. And one of the things that I say every day is that my mission in life is to help people to think bigger, hence the TB, right? Help people to think bigger, which for me means to help wake you up, right? Wake you up to the potential inside of you. How does that show up for you? I know you've done it in front of thousands and thousands of people in an ever-growing audience now, but tell me how that shows up for you in the entrepreneurial space. Like, how does it show up, and why has that become your mission?
Yeah, totally. And what a great question. One of the things that I love, there's a book by a guy named Ryan Holiday. Do you know who Ryan Holiday is?
I do. Yeah.
Oh, freak. Like it's almost annoying how smart he is, Anyway, but he has a book called Ego is the Enemy. Blew my mind. And he has a quote in there that when I read it, it just like hit me in my soul. And this is what he said, essentially. He was like, listen, anybody can win. He's like, you can be smart and win. You can be dumb and win. And he's like, you can be an a-hole and win. He's like, anybody can win. He's like, but there aren't a lot of people who are actually the truest versions of themselves. And then he said, that is the game to play. When he said that, all of a sudden, what was so beautiful, I think, about that is that when you actually are playing this game of untapping potential, of being the truest version of Justin, being the truest version of Kathryn, right? Then all the accolades or all the little things that you're trying to get along the way, they're just a byproduct, right? And what the world needs is people who are aligned with who they are. And so I love this question of like, I'm waking people up. But I think there also, after that comes this question of like, well, what does it even mean to be awake? Like, what does that mean? Like, waking people up? It sounds a little bit hippie, People are like, okay, whatever, like, Kathryn, well, you're great, okay? Like, what does it mean to actually be awake? In my opinion, being awake means that your stories and your actions align with getting you what you want. Your stories and your actions are actually aligned in getting you what you want. So often we have stories in our heads that aren't serving us. They're not actually getting us what we want, right? Your story could be anything from like, I'm not good enough, I can't do that. That's not getting you what you want, right? You also have a lot of people who are taking a lot of actions that aren't actually going to reap the results that they want at all, right? And when your stories and your actions are aligned in getting you what you want, that's when you have an aligned human. That's when you have a human who literally, it's like Midas touch gold. You can do whatever the freak you want to do. And I think what's really beautiful about this, if we look at my clients and my students, and even in my life, I can take you into my Stripe account, Justin. I can literally take you in there, and when you see the spikes go up when we've made some money, it literally wasn't, hey, like what marketing tactic did you implement there? It literally was, I can tell you exactly at that point what I finally aligned for me and my story and my actions. Like I can tell you how I figured out myself right there. And again, it unlocked this ability for me to act bigger and play bigger that a tactic couldn't do. But it was this alignment that allowed me to do that. And so in this game of helping people to awake, like again, we have a design hacking movement. In design hacking, you can do it for funnels or video or podcast or stage, but ultimately what the definition of design hacking is how do you present stories that convert? Stories being an exchange of information, converting meaning to change from one form to another. So if we're telling stories outwardly in marketing, right? It's like, how do you tell stories, maybe an offer, in a way that converts, whether it's through a funnel or a video, a podcast or stage, converting somebody from a subscriber to a buyer, or a buyer to a hyper buyer to like an evangelist for your brand. But what's so beautiful about design hacking, presenting stories that convert, it also is, how do you tell stories to yourself in a way that you actually believe them? So that all of a sudden, this like hidden potential, think bigger, unlock everything inside of you, you align your stories, you align your actions, right? And all of a sudden it converts you from version that you are today to version that you want to be. But it's all about aligning your stories, aligning your actions with getting them, with actually going toward what you want.
I'm already loving this conversation. Like I'm smiling because I'm giddy about what you're saying, because I can't wait to go back and listen to this again, because what you just shared right there is so deep and profound. I absolutely loved it. I want you to rewind here a little bit. So you're saying that once actions and their stories align with what they want, what if what they want isn't maybe aligned with their potential, right? You see some people, especially in the social media world, where what they want maybe isn't conducive to like a good, happy life, right? They just want a certain image. Is there some way that you would coach people to think bigger about what they want in life? That maybe it's not just, I want to make enough to make my mortgage payment, or I want enough to go on a vacation, but no, let's step back a little bit, right? How do you help people through that?
Oh, I think that's such a beautiful question too, right? Because it's like, listen, we have people whose stories and actions were aligned with what they want. And by that definition, Hitler was very awake.
Interesting.
Like his actions and his stories aligned with everything that he wanted. And it's like, is that really what we're after? And it goes back to this question, like, what if what you want isn't actually contributing to your potential, or is pretty self-serving, isn't actually going to help the world? And so what we do in the design hacking world, there's actually 3 doctrines that we live by. And they're almost checks and balances to make sure that like we're not being a little bit crazy, right? Because true happiness is, again, in my opinion, is when you not only awake yourself, but you help other people awake as well. So like doctrine number 1 that we talked about, we believe that like we literally exist to have joy. We enjoy, the definition meaning great happiness. Not like, all right, life's okay, but like extreme great happiness. And it's so fascinating when you ask people, when's the last time you experienced great happiness? Like extreme off the charts happiness. Most people don't. Reason why is because they're not actually building their life. They're just going through the motions. And that's the beautiful thing. When you start to determine your story, you can start to determine the repercussions. So that's number 1. Is when you're trying to figure out, hey, what do I want? Will it bring me great happiness? Great. Not mediocre, not okay, but great. And again, that's anything from, that will be the determining factor, even between like, hey, like, do I want this huge, large DQ blizzard? Or do I want a body that will allow me to live into my late 90s? What's great happiness, right? Like, boom. The second thing is will this help me and others awake, right? And we, inside the design hacking world, we actually have broken down this word awake to mean I think there's 5 different stewardships that we have, 5 different realms that we have the stewardship to wake up. Number 1 is our awareness, our sense of self. Who are we, right? Second one is, I think, our worship. What's our relationship with divinity or a higher power? Doesn't matter. Third one, anatomy. We have stewardship over anatomy. We have to wake that up. How can you expand that to its greatest potential? Number 4, kin, relationships. How are you as a parent? How are you as a partner? And then number 5 is enterprise. How are you as a CEO? And then I think if you're awake, you are just like on all cylinders. You're awake in your awareness, worship, anatomy, kin, and enterprise. So truth number 1 is what you want will get you great happiness. Truth number 2 is, does it help you awake in all those 5 stewardships? Awareness, worship, anatomy, kin, and enterprise. And does it help others? Awareness, worship, anatomy, kin, enterprise. Are your actions self-serving and helping others? And then finally, the really interesting, and the last check or balance that we have, which is tricky for people, is, are you willing to let go of the stories and past truths that have governed your life up to this point? It's really hard to let go of past stories because oftentimes they provide comfort, they provide excuses, but more often than not, they prohibit us from actually getting what we want. So by actually like defining what we want and then putting them through those 3 checks and balances, will this bring you great happiness? Will this wake you and others up? And do you actually really want it? Like, are you actually willing to give up stories to do it? That's what will allow us to, when we say, what do you want? Actually say things that will unlock our potential, that will be serving toward the world, and will actually be aligned with who it is that we really want to be.
It's interesting how much of what you just shared is internal, right? It's an inside game. You think of this concept, looking back at like some of the greatest books ever written, right? Like Think and Grow Rich, right? These timeless classics. And the stuff that you're sharing here about this potential inside of each and every one of us, like so much of that happens under the surface, right? And once you get that right, all of a sudden, similar to like the story of the bamboo, right? For years and years, it's growing underground. And then all of a sudden it pops up and it has phenomenal growth. How much of your why, of you willing to give up your previous stories, has been driven by this desire to unlock that in other people, to where you're like, man, the ground is starting to tremble. I know stuff's happening down there.
Yeah. It's
getting ready to shoot up. Like, how much of that drives you today of unlocking that in other people?
Oh, well, I think a ton, honestly. And I think you've experienced it. It's almost like this high, right? Like literally as we're on the phone, like literally I just got an email that somebody earned badge 8 in the course, which means they've made up the cost of the course in one of my courses. So now I get to send them swag. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy for you. Like, I'm so excited. And it's this high to watch other people wake up. It really, really is. But I do think so often, like you can't wake anybody up if you're asleep. Like even just logistically, like if you are asleep in your bed, you cannot wake somebody else up. And I think this ability to be awake yourself and help other people, one, for me, like selfishly, it's a high. It's actually just a high. Number 2, I think the reason why it's such a pull for me is it almost feels like, I don't know. And I mean, you're this with your think bigger stuff. Like if you're like, it's the same thing when you find anything that works. It's like, even if you find like a piano teacher that's like amazing, you're like, oh my gosh, everybody take on this piano teacher. This works, right? Or like you find design hacking, you're like, everybody needs to know about this. This is amazing. Like when you are living in an aligned, awake state, it almost feels like morally selfish to not invite others. Forcing other, like there are some people that are just more comfortable asleep. And that's their choice. But I think there literally is this like moral responsibility to be like, there is a more, maybe not more, there's a different way to live if you're willing.
What are some of the best ways you've found to wake people up?
Totally. Oh my gosh. Okay. First of all, people have to be willing to wake up. You can't like force somebody to wake up. Like it's not how it's going to work. But one of the most beautiful things about this is, again, like the formula for us is aligning your stories and your actions with what you want. So like, honestly, what we do every single day with like our internal coaching students, we literally will be like, okay, what's your current story? What is it? We're just analyzing every day, living in the facts. What is your current story right now? And then we ask, what do you want? And again, we do this across all 5 stewardships. So let's say we're doing this with like anatomy, right? How are you feeling about your body? How are you feeling in relationship with your body? Current story. What do you actually want? And then does that current story get you what you want? And if the answer is no, then what we have to do is create what we call a desired/required story, the story we want and the story that's actually required for us to get that. So the current story doesn't work in getting us what we want. We have to create a new story to live by. Now the question is like, okay, well, I have this new story. So how do I make the new story true to get me what I want? And it's actually a lot simpler than people make it out to be. If you want a story to be true, all you have to do is live it. So what we say is we're like, cool, if this is your desired required story, start listing out actions that you could take in the next 5 minutes to make that story a reality. And all of a sudden you've adopted this new mentality. If I can give you like a really quick example.
Please.
Happened really recently for me, right? And again, I do checks all the time. And like, you know this, like just by nature of being a human, like it's like literally on my wall all the time, like on my mirror, it says stay awake. Like I'm always trying to stay in my desired required stories. Stay awake, stay awake. Anatomy, worship, or awareness, worship, anatomy, kin, enterprise. Like stay awake across all stewardships, right? So like before I go on Instagram, I'm like, am I trying to dull? What am I trying to dull? What story am I trying to hide from? Right? Before I go there, like, am I being intentional with that? Anyway, but a few weeks ago, I did this like event with Myron Golden and this woman named Teresa Harding. It was awesome. This is an online event. We were trying like how to sell high ticket stuff. Anyway, Myron, so they had already had it together, and then kind of last minute they were like, hey, do you want to partner with us on this? And I was like, well, that just sounds so fun. So yes, of course I do. So I'm like, of course. So Myron's like, listen, like you're good at selling. Why don't you pitch the offer? Which I was like, of course, like, are you kidding? I love all online stuff, but I was actually surprised that he asked me to do it. 1, because he's like the god of sales, and 2, because this woman has done $1 billion in sales, like $1 billion. Like, and listen, I'm just gonna be honest, like right now, I haven't hit the beat, right? So, but I was like, yeah, of course I'll do it. So they asked me to pitch this offer. It's a $15K offer. And while it's happening, like, I know it's converting because people are saying like, I'm in, I just got in, sending screenshots of their like receipts and everything. So like, as I'm pitching, I'm like doing the math, right? And I'm like, we're well past 6 figures. We might be into several 6 figures, right? On this like initial thing. So like I even have the facts that I'm doing okay. You know what I mean? Like we're doing all right. Anyway, but because there was questions and different things like this, like we had like a pretty regimented schedule, and I went an hour over that I was supposed to, like an hour over. But in my mind, I'm like, you want to know what? I just made us about crap of money. Everybody's happy. Like, I'm sure it's fine. But right after the pitch, we were breaking for lunch, and then we were coming back on. So we break for lunch, and I go to our Voxer group, and the only thing that had been said was, oh no, we're going to need to switch the schedule because Kathryn's going really long. And but there was nothing like, oh my gosh, we made this much on the back end, or like, great job, Kathryn, or like, oh my gosh, it's going to be amazing. Like, it was just like, the last thing was this like kind of awkward, like passive, like, we're going to have to switch the schedule, ... And I was like, oh my gosh. So nobody's saying anything, which again, we're just a little anxious lady, right? So I'm like, oh my gosh, everybody hates me. I'm by nature like a pretty anxious person. So I was like, oh my gosh, everybody hates me. I did a terrible job. Like, no one's like, I went way too far over on time. Like, everything's terrible. So I like recognize the spiral, right? So I'm like, okay, Kathryn, listen, this current story is not working for me. So I literally take out my phone and I write down, what's your current story, right? And my current story was that like Myron and Teresa are disappointed in me because I didn't do the sales pitch how they wanted, and the schedule's all screwed up, so they're upset. Like, that's just like my anxious attachment type coming out, right? Where I'm like, everybody hates me, it's terrible, right? We're working on things. So I'm like, okay, but so that's my current story, but what do I want? Like, what I want is to feel very certain and confident that I did the best to my ability, and that they know that I did the best to my ability as well. That's all I need. Even if I didn't kill it, I just need them to know, like, listen, that was my best shot, okay? So that was it. So I was like, is my current story going to give me what I want? No, it's not going to give me what I want. So what's my desired required story, right? And my desired required story was actually pretty similar. It was just like I honestly put forth my very best effort, and because of that, I can be certain in the way that I conduct my actions. And it was something too, where it's like if they have feedback, I'm more than willing to take it, because I'm playing a much bigger game than wanting somebody's approval. That was it. So it was like, what actions can I take to do that? So I was like, listen, I'm going to go and actually ask for feedback. Like, I'm going to go ask for it, because that's what I said, my desired required story.
That's your new story, right? Your new story opened the door for you to go seek feedback. Your previous story was, I'm going to hunker and hide and feel really bad about myself.
Totally. So I go do that. And so I like go to get on Voxer, and it's like kind of being weird. And I'm like, oh, I was like, oh, that's kind of crazy. And so then I'm like, wait, maybe what's happening? And then all of a sudden I go on Instagram and like, it's not working. And all of a sudden I realized my internet's not connected. Like for whatever reason, my data wasn't working. My Wi-Fi wasn't working. So I'm like, what? So I finally get reconnected, and it's just like, it was like, Kathryn, that was an amazing pin, blah, blah. Like Myron like texts me, he's like, dude, that was the best picture I've ever seen online ever. Like all this stuff. And I'm like, what? It was this crazy moment, Justin, where I'm like watching myself. Like I'm seeing these messages come through, and like and again, from like crazy first story, everybody hates me, to messages come through 3.5, 4 minutes, right? And I spiraled. And so quickly because of a story that I had in my head, even though I had factual evidence that showed me otherwise, I was like, everything's terrible. Everybody hates me, blah, blah, blah. But again, I'm like so grateful for that experience, because even if those messages hadn't have come through, it was like, I realized how fast I defaulted to not the truest version potential story of myself, but how quickly I was able to get back, because I identified what I wanted, identified my desired required story, and started to take action on making that story true. And again, so like I go through this process all day. Like I did it this morning, where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. Like my current stories, I'm overwhelmed and I don't have enough time to do all I need to do. I'm like, that's not working for me. So what do I want? And then just going through this process. But that honestly, like going through, what's your current story? What do you want? Do those align? If not, what's your desired required story? And then what actions do we need to take to make that desired required story true? And if you can play that game across all 5 stewardships and intentionally set that for the day, you have a desired required story in your head all day about each of those 5 stewardships. Oh my gosh, anything's possible for you.
Kathryn, you have no idea the gift that you just gave to me and everybody that's listening. I thank you for it. I have to squeeze in my final signature question. I could listen to you all day. We probably will. Again, where can people find you? Before I go to that, where can people find you to follow you? Give us just quickly best place to go.
Oh my gosh. Well, I would love for you guys to come hang out. We have a free Facebook group. It's called Design Hackers Official, where we talk not only about how to present stories that convert to yourself, but also marketing. So if any of this has like resonated with you, or you're like, oh my gosh, I want to do my own internal work, or can you play this exact same game across copy or a Facebook ad? Like the game's, yes, like the game's all the same. So we talk about that all. We have new content there all the time. Or you can stalk me on Instagram or YouTube. We have new stuff every single day. My handles are just Miss Kathryn Jones, MS Kathryn Jones. So wherever you want to go, come hang out with me. I'd love to bond with you.
So good. Okay, so let's go to the signature question of the show, which is this.
Yeah.
You're a big thinker. That's why you're on the Think Bigger Real Estate Show.
Yes.
What does somebody like you do to continue to be a big thinker, to continue to expand your possibilities? I feel like you've talked about that the whole episode, but I'm going to ask you to give us a more answer on it.
Maybe can I give you a daily practice that I do?
Please.
Okay.
Love it.
So I'm saying this as a woman who's never done any farming work whatsoever. But in the agricultural world, in the farming world, right, if you're going to plant crops, there's something called a head gate. So essentially, I want everybody to imagine that there's these rows of, we'll call it corn, right? And at the top of all the rows, there's a huge ditch that runs along it. And the huge ditch is full of water, full of water, full of water. And at the end of the ditch, there's what's called a head gate. It basically is like a dam. You drop it. What happens is the ditch fills up, and then it eventually bleeds into all the rows of corn. But what happens is if you never drop the head gate, then the ditch never fills up and it never overflows into the corn. So you could have this like flowing water ditch happening the whole time, but if you never drop the head gate, your crops are dead. So what I like to view that as is I call it like drop your head gate. So every day I have a Google Doc called Head Gates, where I literally review the day before, and I perceive the water to be like, okay, what are messages either God's telling me, messages I learned from conversations I had, like what are the things that if I were being conscious and paying attention that I would pick up on? So I don't have to learn this lesson over and over and over and over and over again. So again, like all these things, and I drop my head gate. So I stop and take inventory of what were all the things that I learned, or I could have learned if I would have paid attention. And honestly, that practice alone, where you're like, I am trying to interpret and apply meaning from even like the conversation I had with you today. Whereas like, okay, leaving that, like, it could have just been like, oh my gosh, what a great guy. I'm so happy that like we're in the same universe, like so rad. And like, I just love that we're aligned. It's like, okay, cool. Or like tomorrow when I drop my head gates, it's like, what were the lessons that I learned from that I could start applying now? And I think having this aspect of like trying to always pick up the lessons allows me to think bigger, because I'm not having to relearn the same lesson over and over and over and over and over again, because I'm actually paying attention to what life is teaching me. So drop your head gates every day. I think that has been one of the most profound, beautiful things that's really impacted my ability to think bigger.
That was absolutely beautiful. I've asked that question to countless big thinkers, including Grant Cardone. He was on the show, and I'll tell you that you may have just shared my favorite answer that I've ever heard. It was this has been an absolute joy and episode. Ding, 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 you win.
Yes.
So again, I would encourage everybody, if you're not yet following Kathryn, do so. Go find her on social media. As a real estate agent yourselves, right? This audience, a lot of them, there's so much mindset stuff that's keeping you from performing at your highest level, both in business and in life. And the tools that Kathryn just shared will absolutely help you unlock your potential, be able to see it, and live a life in pursuit of it. Kathryn, I'm so grateful for you and what you're doing for the world. And just know that you have sparked a spark within me that is turning into a raging fire to also wake people up. So thank you so much for that. Total pleasure. And thank you everybody for tuning in today. If this has been helpful, please share it with somebody. Let's not keep Kathryn a secret. Kathryn, thank you again, my friend. So fun.
You're awesome. Thank you, Justin.
You bet. Talk to you soon.